Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan. And this morning, I'm really happy to have Jon Edlin on the podcast. He is a tornado survivor. And what he did was he took total devastation in his life, or the material possessions that he had in his life, and he turned that into a business. He's devoted himself to helping others prepare for tornadoes. And I think there'll be lots of lessons for all sorts of forms of resilience. So just really pleased to have Jon on the podcast. Jon, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And right now you're sitting where? Are you in Did you say Kansas City?
Yeah, Kansas City on the Kansas side.
Mm-hmm. And you shifted from this tornado occurred, in 2020? Was it in Nashville where you were living with your family?
Yeah. My family and I were out there. My wife's a singer-songwriter, so we were out there living the dream. And and then 2020 happened, and we moved back to Kansas City. This is where I grew up, so very familiar to me.
And I want to get into the tornado and your description of it, but it was important for everybody's emotional well-being to shift locations, right? After that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Family and community is such a big deal, and you learn that after going through something like that, and being back in Kansas City has been really good for my family.
That's fantastic. And is your wife still doing her singing and songwriting?
Yeah. She plays gigs around town, and then also, of course, just is able to do the Zoom meetings and go out to Nashville every once in a while and record. So still going strong.
God, that's great. Good for you. Good for her. Good for your family. And I believe now that one of your daughters just had a graduation. Is that right?
Actually, it was my nephew who had the graduation. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yep. So my daughter's 14 now, and my son is 11. And at the time of the tornado, they were 5 and 7. So it's been 6 years, and they've grown quite a bit.
So good. All in the family. Let's talk about that incredibly harrowing experience. Most of my listeners have never experienced a tornado. I never have experienced a tornado. You grew up in Tornado Alley, and I guess Tennessee is in Dixie Alley, I guess.
That's right.
What happened? You must have heard in the news that the conditions were such that there might be tornadoes in your area. But walk us through that whole experience.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that growing up in Kansas City, I had, just like you said, heard a lot of tornado warnings, knew what to do. You go down to the basement, you go to the lowest level of your house or in the innermost part of your house. I was trained in school. We did tornado training in school of how to protect yourself. But I had never seen a tornado, never even been really close to a tornado growing up. So when I'm 33 living out in Nashville, we heard that there was a chance of a tornado before we went to bed that night. Like at 10 o'clock at night, we're watching the news, and the meteorologist is like, hey, there's a small chance of a tornado. And my wife said, she's like, well, what do we do if we were hit by a tornado? And I said, babe, I was like, don't worry about Nashville tornadoes. They're nothing like Kansas tornadoes. They would just skip on the hills, and we live in a valley. That's literally what I said to her, like famous almost last words.
Yeah.
Because three hours later, I'm getting that buzz on my phone that says tornado warning, seek shelter immediately. Even then, I'm like, Nashville, you don't know tornadoes. I'm sure it's
let me interrupt you. There's this buzz on the phone. There's some sort of an alert system that everybody's got.
Yeah, it's an emergency alert system. Usually just goes out to like the county. I think now, like in the past 6 years, they've gotten a little bit better to pinpoint it just exactly where the tornado warning is. But it's for the whole Davidson County, which is Nashville area. And so everybody gets that, but a lot of people ignore it. I had neighbors who got that warning, looked at it, and went back to bed. Because it's just like, And but I was like, I should probably just double check. And I really wanted to go back to bed. It's 1 a.m., 12:55 a.m. to be exact, right? And so I get up and I check the weather, and she's like, the meteorologist, like, there's a tornado on the ground in downtown Nashville, and we're exactly 10 miles east of Nashville. So if you're familiar with Nashville, it's like downtown Nashville. We're in Donaldson, which is East Nashville by Opryland. So I'm like, okay, we don't have a basement, so we're just going to go in the innermost part of the house. So I wake up my wife. I say, hey, we need to get the kids right out this tornado warning. Of course, we just think it's going to be a regular tornado warning where we just kind of ride it out. Obviously, it's not going to hit us.
Sure. So
we grab the kids again. My daughter's 7 years old. My son's 5 years old. We get them into the hallway, and it's one of those old houses. There's a ranch house where all the doors shut to the hallway. And so I'm closing the last door, and I'm going to peek my head out and look at the TV one last time, but then all the lights went off. And you could hear it, like they say, like it sounds like a train, but it was more like 5 jet engines, and it just rumbles, your chest. It's
Wow.
just like
Yeah.
absolutely terrifying that this gigantic thing is coming towards us. And I could feel it and I could hear it. And I looked at my wife and I said, it's coming. And she had our 5-year-old sitting in her lap and she huddled him. And I saw my little 7-year-old daughter just laying there kind of on a pallet that we had created. And I got on top of her. And as soon as I did, my ears popped.
Ooh.
And all the windows pop, 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 and glass. And then the most intense amount of wind just comes rushing into us. And it's shoving glass and insulation and dirt and mud underneath the doors. And it's sucking my daughter and I back and forth in between our two doors. And I had that feeling like I was just going to be sucked out and thrown into the front yard. And I was like, God, just save my family. And then as soon as I thought that, it stopped and it was just dead silence, like that eerie silence. It smelled like propane and wood and mud. And I looked around and we were all okay. And we were all just in shock. Like it was just dead silence. Even when the tornado went over us, obviously it's really loud, but there was no screaming. There was no panicking. It was just like shock. And if you talk to my kids afterwards, they'll say like, we didn't know what was happening. Like they didn't even know if they were like, maybe I'm in a dream still. Cause it's 1 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's just glass everywhere. So I go ahead and I say, I'm going to put on shoes for everybody. We're going to get shoes for everybody. I open up the door to my kids' room and it's completely gone. Windows gone, ceiling's gone. And I shut the door and I look at my wife again, just shocked, say, okay, their room's gone. And then I open up the door to our bedroom. There's a brick wall on top of our bed. Ceiling's gone, windows gone, walls are gone. But I climbed over the brick wall to get my wife's shoes. And I went back into their room, got their shoes. And called my cousin, and it took him about 2 hours. He only lived like 15 minutes away, but it took him about 2 hours to get to our house and get us out of that dangerous house. And the house is a complete loss, totally demolished, but we walked away with not a scratch on us. And so there's that's a lot.
And all that took place in how many minutes, that destruction?
So 11:55 is when I woke up with the phone, and then and then it hit at 12, I think it was 12:01, but when it's over top of you, it's only 16 seconds. I mean, it felt like 30 minutes. You can imagine it just like, it felt like forever, but according to science, it's somewhere between like 5 and 15 seconds, depending on the speed of the tornado. It was an EF3 tornado, which if you're familiar with the EF scale, the Fujita scale, it's, EF0 is going to be your smallest. EF5 is going to be like the really big, like Joplin ones. So we're right in the middle there. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about that scale in a few minutes here, but let's go back to even that night you called. Your cell phone worked, right? You had no power, but you had your cell phone on. You were with you.
Well, the power was on when it went off. So the power was on when my phone went off. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then your cell phone. I guess your cell phone. Did you have a cell phone? Was it you called your cousin with?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came over after a couple of hours, and you're still all just huddled in that room. There must have been power lines down everywhere. You said broken glass, and all sorts of construction materials. And then did he have to sort of climb over things to get you guys safely out? Is that the
way that's exactly what happened. Is we were waiting for him to come, and then he said, hey, I can only get like 3 blocks close to your house. And so he walked his way over to us, and he's like, I don't know how we're going to get out of here with the kids and everything, because there's power lines everywhere, huge trees. Both our cars were completely smashed by a big tree. And we're like, well, we're going to have to do the best we can because we can't stay in this house. Yeah. So we walked over, 3 blocks, walking over power lines, just being super careful with the kids. Of course, like my 5-year-old, I could hold in my arm, and my daughter, we could hold with the hand, but we were just very careful and luckily made it to his car without any incidents.
And then went off to his house, and I'm sure you couldn't sleep at that point.
No. And it was, it's the craziest thing in the morning, because you have a lot of people who are seeing, because it's national news. I mean, this tornado was on the ground for 63 miles. It killed 25 people. Yeah. And it's national news. And so, you get all these texts from people back in Kansas City. You get all these texts from, people in Nashville who were south of it and didn't even know what was happening, but woke up. One of my friends was on the treadmill, and he looked up at the news and was like, oh, there's a tornado right over John's house. So, of course he's going to text and say, John, you okay? And he's expecting the text to be, yeah, I'm fine. But I was like, house is gone. We all survived. grateful to be alive is like what I would just get text after text after text. But yeah, we didn't sleep that night, and we just woke up to all those texts. And yeah.
How do you pick up the pieces? I did listen to a recording you did with another podcaster, and it sounds like one of the beautiful things is that, the community really rallied. I mean, people were really kind, but what were some of the steps that you took to, like I said, pick up the pieces, kind of how do you carry on at that point? All your material beings are gone, or possessions are gone. You're fortunate as hell. Your family's okay.
Right. Yeah. We were lucky we weren't in the hospital and that nobody had any kind of cuts or bruises, even, honestly.
Really?
But so it's just material things. So you're like, okay, obviously you feel a lot of gratefulness for that.
Yeah.
And then you just have to kind of sort through anything that you might, 'cause your brain can't really process what happened. So you look at something and you say, oh, this is good. Like, this is a kid's stuffed animal. It will be fine. But then you pick it up and it's got insulation just embedded in it. And there's nothing you can do about it. Or like, oh, this t-shirt looks great. And we wash it and there's still insulation in it. And so you're learning some things that you just didn't even know, like the insulation doesn't wash out. And so it may look okay, but it's not okay. And then you learn a lot of things about insurance and about how, you got to itemize everything in order to get your check. And it's just overwhelming. And then you got to find a place to live, because we weren't going to live at my cousin's all the time. He didn't have room for us. And so it's like, we get a hotel, but then that hotel's kind of doesn't have like a kitchen and stuff that we need. So now we need a rental house until our house is rebuilt. And there's just so many things. So you just take it little by little, day by day, and surround yourself with people who love you and who care about you. And I'll tell you what, they showed up in droves.
Isn't that great? Isn't that great? And you said it was a 65-mile long swath of land that this tornado covered. 25 people were killed, tragically killed. Was every house in your neighborhood taken out, or were some standing and others were wiped out?
I think that's the hardest thing is with tornadoes. A lot of them inside, a lot of people don't know this, but inside a tornado, there's multiple vortexes. And so that's why one house can be completely destroyed and the next door neighbors, nothing wrong. And that happened in our neighborhood. And it honestly was frustrating to me, because my next door neighbors, it was like, didn't even have a shingle off their roof.
No.
And you're just like, what? Like, is this a personal attack? Like, what is going on? You just start to question everything. And so, yeah. So, I mean, definitely our neighborhood, like, you could see a line where it went through, but you could also see where other houses are totally fine. Yeah, it was. And in our neighborhood, nobody died. So most of the deaths happened in Cookville. And so that's, I mean, when I say 63 miles, like, that's a very long track supercell that went through Tennessee, because Cookville's a good, hour and a half or maybe an hour away from Nashville. So, it had gotten to an EF4 at that point, and that's where most of the casualties happened.
Right. And this is, I learned this is something called Dixie Alley, right? A certain number, describe that sort of more common tornado alley, and then the Dixie Alley.
Yeah, I mean, Tornado Alley, again, is where I grew up, Kansas City, especially like western Kansas, and Oklahoma City, obviously, like, we're all familiar with Norman, Oklahoma, and where Twisters, the movie, and Twister, the movie, both of those movies were kind of like based in Texas. That's Tornado Alley, even all the way up Nebraska and those types of things. And then Dixie Alley is going to be like Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana and Nashville, just kind of fits right in there, and a little bit of Kentucky as well. So that's Dixie Alley. And we've seen a lot of movement to more tornadoes being in that area. There's also a lot more nocturnal tornadoes, it seems like, and also just a lot more populated areas with a lot more trees. So when you have a tornado out in western Kansas where nobody's at and there's no trees, if there's a tornado and nobody sees it, did it happen? And now with satellite, we could say that, but I'm just saying it's not going to get the news coverage like Dixie Alley. So you're going to see a lot more news coverage on Dixie Alley, because it's just devastating. I mean, one just went through Mississippi last week, and it was devastating. It's just rough.
Yeah. And then back to this EF scale, that was the enhanced Fujita scale.
That's right.
It goes from EF0, which is still 65 miles per hour to 85 miles per hour, up to EF5, which is over 200. And your tornado EF3 was in that 135 to 165 miles per hour. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a great documentary called Mr. Tornado. It's on PBS, and it talks about Ted Fujita, who is the guy who created the Fujita scale. And his story is incredible because he actually came up with it based off of his experience being a young scientist in Japan after the atomic bomb. So he learned how to judge the destruction from a tornado based off of the destruction from an atomic bomb, from the atomic bomb. It's just a fascinating story. I highly recommend watching that documentary if you have time. And it really helps you understand. That's why it's an enhanced Fujita scale, because his first one, just the Fujita scale, had to be kind of changed with the more technology that came in, because obviously, you know, he created this a long time ago. And so now with the more advanced technology we have, that we kind of realize we need to adjust the numbers a little bit.
Right, and apparently, or what I've learned is that when you get the news report or when you get that alert on your phone, it's not saying it's an EF3. They're rating these tornadoes based on the damage after the fact. So, were you given any sense of how intense that cell was coming your way that night?
The only reason why I had some idea of it was just looking at the radar. That sometimes you can see from the radar the hook and the debris kind of that's built up. So like an EF0 is going to have a smaller hook, or sometimes not even barely a hook at all, that you can see from radar. The larger the tornado, you know, you got the supercell, and then there's a little hook that comes off of it. And if you look at the Joplin radar and you see an EF5 hook, it's gigantic. And you look at the hook that came over our house, because I went back and I took screenshots of our radar that went directly over our house, and it was, you know, a decent size. It was an EF3 size hook. So that would be the only way that you would know, is just by looking at radar and saying, like, and guessing that it's going to be significant.
Yeah. Now, there are tornadoes in other parts of the world, I've learned, but it sounds like, I mean, somebody said the United States is the epicenter, which is, I'm in California where we have lots of earthquakes. So that's a charged word. But anyway, that the United States is the epicenter of tornadic activity in the world. And I gather that you've got the dry air coming from the southwest that's kind of coming east of the Rockies and hitting this warm, moist air
from the Gulf.
From the Gulf. And that's what creates this activity. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's one of the reasons why we have such great, you know, cropland and that type of thing, but it's also why we have the tornadoes. And I actually heard the other day about how, like, the earth is just continually trying to distribute, the wet weather and the hot weather and all that. And so that's kind of why you have thunderstorms and tornadoes and a lot of these cold fronts and warm fronts, and all that is just the way the earth is trying to balance out all this heat and wet and all that. So it's the way the world works.
That's really, really interesting. And I've done a little bit of research, you can tell, very little, but just prepared talking to you, John. I didn't want to embarrass myself, but I've been very focused in my career on climate change, or global warming, a lot of people call it. And it sounds as though the science is not conclusive that as we increase carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, that this is causing a lot more tornadic activity. It sounds like it's a complex interaction. It sounds like we're warming, this warming is causing sort of more outbreaks where you'd have more concentrations, and maybe it's less predictable. You used to have a tornado season, and now it's stretched out. Is that kind of your read on the whole thing?
Well, absolutely. When you think about where some of these tornadoes are happening, even just if you look back at March of this year, you're going to see a lot of tornadoes up in Michigan and Minnesota, and which is not typical. Usually their tornado season is going to be in the fall. And so the fact that it happened in March is just showing how the weather patterns are changing. I think one thing that's hard is, you're going to be looking at how many tornadoes touched down in 2026 versus 1906. And obviously, like I just mentioned, you're going to be like, if there was a tornado in Kansas and nobody saw it, did it happen? And so that's going to mess with the numbers too. So I think there's a lot of things that people have to put into context in order to figure out what exactly is happening.
Right. But all the more reason to be all that much more prepared. We have the same thing. I live here in Los Angeles. We have just a few miles from where I'm sitting right now was this huge fire that wiped out, I think, 12,000 homes just last year. And it wasn't in what we call, quote unquote, wildfire season, right? It was, it was in January. It was historically, we haven't had a problem. And so, there's no longer a wildfire season. And I suppose maybe there's no longer as concentrated a tornado season either. But now how did it come about? I want to shift to your business and I call it seva. In the yoga world, they would call it a seva. What you decided to do to take your experience and to turn it into something very positive for others. How did that come about that you got into Edlin Tornado Solutions?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I knew after it happened, a lot of people were asking me questions of like, man, I can't imagine if this happened to my family, what would I do? And they were talking more about like overcoming adversity, like mentally, how do you overcome that? Because you also have to remember this happened March 3rd, 2020.
Yeah.
So COVID happened 2 weeks later.
Oh, wow.
So, it was just a lot. Like we're trying to buy furniture and everything. Furniture stores are closed. So we got to buy it online. And, it was just a crazy, crazy time. People were giving us, food, like a meal train. And then they kind of stopped because they're like, well, we don't want to give you COVID because we don't want to make you food anymore. So it's just like, it's crazy. So people were, I would say like a year after, people were like, man, how did you overcome this? I had really bad storm anxiety. I overcame that through EMDR. So I would talk a lot about that with people. And people were very interested. So then I just started taking every opportunity I could. When I moved to Kansas City, I was working for a large church. So that gave me kind of a stage to be able to talk more about my story. And every time I would talk more about like overcoming adversity, they would say, yeah, but what would I do if I was hit by a tornado? What would I do to prepare for a tornado? Like, what do you wish you would have done? And so I created this tornado survival guidebook. And so I would give that to people. And then like that doesn't, but like really what would I have? I was like, well, just make like a tornado go bag. And they're like, a what? And I was like, well, make a bag, like get an old bag and put a lantern in it and all this. Like, can you just do it for me? That kind of thing. So I was like, okay. Or they would say like, well, what about this on Amazon? The survival kit. And I was like, honestly, and I bought one of those and I showed my friend, I was like, look at all this stuff that's packed. You got 5 days of food. You don't need that. You got this weird shovel thing. Not going to need that. And it just actually would have hurt me because I would be digging through this bag trying to find the first aid kit, which is actually what I need, or a lantern, which is actually what I need. And so I just found kind of like this hole in the market for what I felt like people actually needed during tornado season. And then the education to know why they need it. And the education also lowers storm anxiety in their kids. Because my kids obviously had real bad storm anxiety. I had bad storm anxiety too. And how do you cure that? Education, educating yourself.
Amazing. Now you mentioned a couple of things I wanted to circle back on. EMDR, you said that helped you out with the storming. What is EMDR?
Oh, EMDR is it's an eye movement desensitization process. I said that really weird, but it's a counseling. It's something a counselor does, and it walks you through a traumatic event and it releases that from you. And so that was a huge help for me because I would shake. I woke up at 12:55 a.m. every single night for 3 months in a row and would relive the whole thing and shake. And so going to counseling, getting that EMDR treatment relieved my body of that stress that was kind of hidden in me. So that was huge. But yeah, that's what EMDR stands for.
And did your wife and your kids have that also, or you you had the protector role, or is that the way you saw it?
Yeah, well, so yeah, my wife was up against a solid wall with my son, and didn't feel the back and forth and that kind of end of life moment in a sense. And my daughter, I mean, she says like I was kind of asleep, like you were on top of me, so I didn't feel much. I don't think she felt that. I think I was the one who felt like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. And so I think I just held that trauma and needed help releasing that.
So you wrote this guide, and I take it is that available now for?
Yeah, it's on Amazon and it comes with each bag because so I created the Tornado Go bag, and big part of that is the education. So the Tornado Survival Guide comes in the bag. It starts off with don't believe the myths, like I did, where I told my wife, oh, it's just going to jump on the hills.
Big deal. Yeah, no big deal.
Right. Yeah. So don't do that. And there's like 10 more myths that honestly I kind of believe too, like that doesn't hit near water and just things that you just believe. And so that's the first thing. And then it walks you through all the other stuff, interweaving my story, but it's small because I didn't want it to be overwhelming to people, but it comes with each bag, or you can buy it separately on Amazon. You just type in Tornado Survival Guide or type in my name on Amazon. You can get a copy.
Great. And then let's go through the kit. You've mentioned a couple things that are in the kit. A light is in the kit. A first aid kit is in the kit, or in the bag. Sorry. What else is in there?
So you have a whistle in case you know, were to fall on top of you. You have a whistle there. You have extra gauze pads, because gauze is kind of the thing that's going to help if you're cut by anything. Like, you want extra gauze pads that are accessible right away. And then what you want is to know that you know where everything's going to go before the tornado happens. So some things that I wish I would have had is like my keys and wallet. So that doesn't come with the bag, obviously, because I don't have your keys and wallet, but there's a special compartment. So like a blueprint of like, this is where you put everything. There's pockets on the outside. This is where you put your keys and wallet when the tornado watch is issued, so that you're ready. You're not looking around for your keys and wallet. If you have a dog, like, put your dog's leash in there. If you have medication, put medication in there during the tornado watch. And then after the tornado watch is done, then take them out and get back to life. But in laptop too, like, there's a compartment for your laptop. My laptop was completely crushed by that huge brick wall. And after, you can imagine, after a tornado, you need your laptop for insurance and those types of things.
Yeah.
And it just would have been so simple just to throw it into a bag. And we don't do a duffel bag. We don't do a suitcase. We don't do a tote bag, because, like I said, we had to walk 3 blocks over power lines and everything. You really need a good quality backpack to be able to have everything you need.
Right. And that's what it is. It's a backpack. And so I think I heard that you told this other podcaster that you actually give a hook, so that you can, the idea is that the person, once they buy this bag from you, puts the hook on a wall in the safe place in your house.
That's right.
That's where it's very deliberate. So you have.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because sometimes I forget that, like, part of it, but I do love that, because people will send me a picture of their hook, their bag on the hook in their safe spot, and then I send them that free mug that says thank you for taking it seriously. And actually, because what good is a bag if it stays in the box?
Right. Now, the best safe spot, like you said, your house didn't have a basement. The best safe spot would be a basement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Lower part of the house. That's where you want to be, because you're mainly looking, you don't want any walls to crumble in on you. And so that's like, so if you get into the innermost part of the house, you're not going to have walls that fall on you. And if you're in the basement, you're going to have walls that fall on you as well.
Now, I think you mentioned before that the schools typically are pretty well prepared for tornadoes. They have a plan. Maybe they have emergency kits, that kind of thing. But would you advocate having a bag at work or in your car also? Or, I mean, it seems like some of the time you're going to be home, but some of the time you're not going to be home.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when there's a chance of a tornado, like, you need to not be in your car. You need to not be on the road. Like, that's the worst place to be. You do not want to do that. So I would not recommend having it in your car, because that's just not good. Like, you don't want to be there. At work, I would just recommend, like, you want to go into the bathroom, like the innermost part of the building, and be in the bathroom. And a lot of those buildings that you're in are really a lot sturdier than your house. So you're probably going to be fine. Like, if you're in a hotel and you go to the bathroom, like, you're going to be okay. One of the things to think about is if you're on an upper level and it hits you, like, getting down the stairs. Like, I had some friends who were in apartments and they were okay because it was a sturdy building. But then when they tried to get down the stairs, it was all, filled with glass and everything. So they're kind of trapped on the 3rd floor for a while. Yeah. So that's another reason why you try to get down at the lower level, but away from windows, away from outside walls. I don't think you need necessarily a bag. For that, I obviously, like, most offices have first aid kits and that kind of thing, which is probably the most important. But it's more for your kids. I mean, really, like, when your kids see that bag there, they know that you have a plan. It really lowers their storm anxiety as well.
So how are we doing? I mean, you've devoted your life, or a lot of your life, a lot of your waking
past 6
hours
years
to educating people, the course, the bags or the kits. Would you say that now many people are prepared, or I guess I want to inverse this question. Are there a lot of people that are still not prepared?
Well, yeah, I mean, you think about all of Dixie Alley and all of Tornado Alley, and really since launching, I've really focused on the Kansas City area because that's where I have ties, and I've been on multiple news channels here and gotten the word out, and I feel like a lot more Kansas Cityans are prepared, and I feel really good about that and educated. But obviously, like, my dream and my goal is for everybody in Tornado Alley and Dixie Alley to have one of these bags, to have a plan, and to be ready for whatever comes their way, because everybody always says, oh, I never thought it would happen to me, until it does.
Right. Well, congratulations and thank you for what you've done on that. I immediately started thinking about California, of course, where we have earthquakes and wildfires. And, I don't think there's enough emergency preparedness. And so your message is obviously particularly relevant to Tornado Alley and to Dixie Alley, and the tornadic activity. But there's lots of other, catastrophes for which many people are not prepared. How do we get the message out there that what is that? An ounce of prevention can save your life, literally.
Right.
What is your response to that? And in terms of how do we encourage everyone, regardless of where you live and regardless of what the catastrophe at hand is, how do we get everyone to put a little bit more time and effort into preparedness?
Yeah, I think when you're watching the news and you're hearing these stories, there's this thing that you want.
Right?
Yeah, you're desensitized to it. You're thinking, oh, that couldn't happen. So instead of doing that, really think about that. Really think, oh wow, what would it be like to go through that? What would that be like for my family? What would that be like for me? And I think once you visualize yourself that happening, then you're going to take preparedness seriously. The only other thing that I could say is that people do it a lot like wills, where they're like, oh, if I make a will, then I'll die right away, which is not true. It's just something, it's just like, oh, if I have a tornado go bag, if I have preparedness kit, that means I'm going to get hit by a tornado. Obviously, that doesn't make sense. But so override that part of your brain that's saying that, because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Jon, thanks for sharing some time with us this morning and for sharing your story. And most importantly, thanks for what you're doing with helping so many people get prepared so that they're safe and sound like your family.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's EcoLogic. We'll see you next time.